So I'm Ron Lamar from LaValle Brensinger Architects. And since we met last, the school board has gone out and gotten a geotechnical engineer to go to the existing site and dig some test pits. We've also flagged all of the wetlands on the property and confirmed.
In their packets, they have John Turner's memo.
Okay.
But we haven't read it yet. We haven't read it, so.
No, I just wanted to make sure.
Well, really the gist of the memo was to put together some information so that we as the architectural team, Bowen Corporation as the contractor, and our structural engineer, as well as John Turner Consulting, could really come back and address the issues that were raised at the last meeting, which was there were some issues with an addition and renovation project back in the 90s. Is this site actually buildable? So the short answer is yes, and then we can talk about some details if you like. Just a couple big picture things. The one thing you got going for you with this project, which obviously was different from the 90s, is this is a standalone new building, what we're talking about. So you're not tied into any floor levels, if you will. You're not tied into any particular location, like how does it actually connect to the building. So because of that, and because obviously you can see in the memo that there is ledge on the site, as someone pointed out, we have the opportunity to do foundations completely differently as a standalone building. We can take advantage of the ledge by sitting the building on top of the ledge and bringing some dirt up, if you will, as opposed to drilling down and digging out the ledge. So there's lots of different opportunities that we have. The great news is there's ledge, which means your geothermal system is going to be far more efficient. So if you had less ledge on a site, for instance, you'd have to drill more wells to get the certain amount of bore length that you need for heating and cooling in a facility. We haven't done exhaustive explorations yet in terms of how dense the rock is or where the building would actually go on the site, because we wanted to get back to you with the information of, is there anything about the site that would scare us into saying that really it's not a buildable site? I'll give you an example of that. We've had sites before where there's a lot of clay. Clay can absorb moisture, and at times of the year it gets very dense, it gets very soupy. That's a scary proposition. So most times that becomes an expensive site, aside from geopiers or other things. So I think what John Turner's report shows and what we've been able to do, meaning LaValle Brensinger, our structural engineer, and Bowen Corporation, was to look at this and say there's nothing that would lead us to say that this is not a buildable site.
So questions about, well, that was the question we posed. So we have questions for Ron? So just in terms of process, once you say this is where we're going to, this is the footprint of the building that we anticipate building, I anticipate then there's much more densely, located borings to make sure that on that particular footprint, things are workable. Is that the way it goes?
Correct. So what we would do is, as we started our visioning sessions, the visioning sessions are really for us to listen to the community. It's not for us to talk about our ideas or what we think. We'd like to know what you think. So as we continue those, we're going to get to a point where we are going to start talking about how would the building fit onto the site. Where are those limits in terms of the wetland? Where is the property line? How far away from the existing school do we need to stay so that you can actually occupy and operate the school during construction? And so at that point, we would start, basically generating some kind of footprint or some kind of layout of what we would consider the buildable area. Like we're going to stay within these limits right here. And then to your point, what we would do in cooperation with, as we're designing the footprint of the building, come in and drill some deep borings. Those deep borings would tell us exactly what we're looking at. They would also tell us the density of the rock, which would then determine how do we actually sit on that rock. How do we connect to it? How do we, address that? The other thing that we would do is drill a test well, and Jim was able to get, in his maintenance records, you actually have an 825-foot well on the site right now that you use for lawn irrigation. So we've actually reached out to the geothermal engineer just this afternoon to say, is there any way, we could use that well, if you will, to get information on the ground, on the earth. In other words, what is that heat transference that's going to happen if we were to put a well in there? If they can do that, then we would come out and check that out. If they couldn't do that, then we would come in and actually drill a well. Then put in, the pipes that you would see in a geothermal well, and we would do some testing. And that would give us the heating and cooling capacity of the rock itself. All rock is different. So you can get some solid rock, you can get rock that have fissures through it with groundwater. And remember, we're not touching the groundwater, but as that rock gets looser, the conductivity, I believe is the word, of the heat and cooling loss is different from well to well. So we would want to get that information because we also want to locate a well field as part of the project.
Thanks. Brian?
Does the amount of ledge, does it make a big difference in the cost of the building? Or is it, I know it has pluses and minuses, but does it make a big difference depending on how much ledge you find?
Well, the good news is, as you can see in the report, there's not a lot of outcroppings, right? So you're going down 2 feet just to begin with. So the goal here is to take out as little as possible. For instance, if there's a big flat area where we're going to put the footprint of the school, then that whole school would sit on top of the ledge, and we'd build a grade up around it. And when the old school comes down, if you look at the road that accesses right in front of the main entrance, it's high up, and then your land actually slopes down to the back parking lot in the field. And what we're thinking is, well, if we go up over here, then really it's the same elevation from here to here. So the idea is to limit the amount of rock that needs to come out. So, and that was the contractor's feeling as well. Why drill through rock if you don't have to? If it were an addition renovation project and you were trying to make the first floors line up or the second floors line up, you really have no choice, right? You have to figure something out there where it just becomes very difficult. And, so lots of times the answer is you got to dig out the rock or move the addition further away from the building with the ramps.
Ron, can you tell us the next steps in terms of what you're going to be doing in the immediate future?
Yep. So we had 2 great visioning sessions, and thank you for everybody who could attend. We gained lots of information from everybody, from the students to the selectmen from the towns. So, and everybody in between, obviously the educators, and we had parents there. What we've done in terms of listening is sort of written down what everybody said, which is significant about the school, and I think we went through this last time. Now what we need to do is bring those findings back to a small focus group made up of representatives of all of those different groups that we had met with over the 2 days to determine, did we listen, did we hear what you wanted us to hear? Sometimes somebody says tomato or tomato, and we're writing it down. We want to make sure that if it's a tomato, it's a tomato. And so we're going to present that to everybody in a few hours of a workshop. The next few hours will be, now that we're confident that we've listened and we've got everybody's thoughts on paper, we're going to ask to answer several questions. And we've submitted those questions back when we did the first workshops. And those questions have to do with really, what is Oyster River Middle School going to be? How are you going to address the educational future of technology? How are you going to be able to address the future of curriculum? How are you going to be able to address the social, emotional learning aspects into the future? And so those questions are really important, because once we design this school, we want to do it so that it's adaptable and flexible into the future. And we don't want to dictate what you should be doing. We'll tell you if you're going down the wrong road, with bars and prisons and things like that. But I think what we really want to be able to say is, for one thing, we learned that there's an incredible music program here, right?
Right.
So your school, right off the bat, if you were to say to me, okay, start, I would think, well, the big theme is going to be music. But there may actually be a lot more to that, and a lot more in terms of the underlying parts and pieces of how this whole thing goes together. And that's what the next big workshop is about. Once that happens, we're going to put together a document for you all to see what we did, how we did it, the information we gathered, and the conclusions we came to. And the conclusions are really, how do those questions get answered? And that's the second part of the workshop, is to go over those questions with everybody, talk about the concept of answering those questions, like what do people really think? And then we put together what I'm talking about is this draft piece that says this is now the vision. So this is what Oyster River Middle School is really going to be like in the future. That's when we sit down with all of the focus group of educators and students to really talk about what is 5th grade, what is 6th grade, how does the environment start to organize itself around all the pieces with that vision in mind.
So Ron, I just want to share with the board, that report back to the visioning group is November 19th from 6 to 8 p.m. And then once Ron has done that piece, we'll bring him back and share those results to the school board on December 5th.
And we can go to that meeting on the 18th.
And you're more than welcome to go to the meeting on the 19th.
Yeah.
If you can attend, that would be great. But you're going to get a special board report to you on the 5th. So if you can't make it, you'll get it on the 5th.
Where is that meeting, where is this going?
It's going to be at the middle school in the multipurpose room.
Multipurpose room.
Just one question about, we talked a little bit today, we had a meeting earlier today, and part of the land slopes down toward the Marsh area, which I think in our discussions, you saw that as a challenge, but also possibly as an opportunity in terms of envisioning the school. You know, I wonder if you could say something about that aspect of the site, that, you know, there is this sloping down toward the Marsh area.
Yeah. So the great thing is you've got this great marsh down there, and it's a wonderful little environmental or ecological educational opportunity for the students, right? So how do you get from the level of the ball field that's there now with the fence going around it, how do you get down there? And so our team was talking about possibly terracing, you know, down that hill, whether that terrace is part of the building itself or whether that terrace is outdoor space. One of the things that came up during the visioning was the importance for outdoor space and be able to let the children run around, allow them to have recess without buses driving through and everything else. And the nice thing about that is, depending on how we do those terraces, how do we integrate that hill into the building? So it's, number one, it's something nobody else has, right? It's very special to Oyster River. And number two, it takes care of really the social and emotional needs of the students to get out, get some exercise, get out into the ecology, I guess you would call it, of the site. Maybe the science aspect is right off of that area, so you can have indoor sort of outdoor science, indoor-outdoor eating. So there's really a lot of opportunity for that hill. Not to say that, you know, we're just going to completely stay away from the hill and ignore it, because it really does create a nice little bowl, which is very secure, actually. So you really don't need fences for any kind of playground if you have this nice sort of bowl, if you will, that people can sort of terrace down into and feel safe and secure.
I mean, I think that's one of the concerns I heard, that you'd have the potential to have a really large retaining wall, very high retaining wall,
Yeah.
forming that, which would be kind of unsightly.
Very. But that's a great thought, you know, like, how do we address that hill? How do we make it part of the project? Not be scared of it, but embrace it without having to build big, tall retaining walls. Sometimes big, tall retaining walls are okay. We did a nice war memorial, actually, on one site that had a 10-foot high retaining wall. Kind of killed two birds with one stone. So, but I don't see that here. I think, you know, you get a great opportunity to step down that hill into the wetlands.
Does the test pits you've already done, is it that test or other ones down the road that'll allow you to know if that land can actually handle the weight of a large building like that?
Yeah, and we'll definitely be looking into that.
Okay. But the test pits don't tell that. It's
No,
when you
the
do
test pits
boring
don't
and all
tell that right now.
Yeah.
No.
Is that a concern, or is that?
No, because we know there's rock there.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think what the test pits tell us is that the rock pretty much goes across and then heads downhill. The question is, how far and how fast does it head downhill? And how do we take advantage of that to tie in everything we're doing, you know, to the stability of the rock? So, lots more to investigate, obviously. This is, you know, it's a kind of a blue sky speaking right now, right? So we've got lots of ideas, lots of things that we can do. We just got to find the most cost-effective way of getting the biggest bang for your buck.
Other questions? Well, thank you so much for coming.
Oh, you're welcome.